Welcome viewers again to the channel. Today's topic is David Malouf's poem Wild Lemons. This time the topic is different. It is not from British literature, rather from Australian literature, and we are going to analyze the poem bit by bit. Without wasting time, let us know who is, by the way, Malouf. So this is the picture of David Malouf, Australian poet, novelist, short story writer, playwright and librettist. And what is librettist? A person who writes the words for an opera or a musical play. His poetry collection called Revolving Days Selected Poems, published in 2008, is divided into 4 sections on childhood, then Europe, then relocating to Sydney, then traveling between Europe and Australia. So David Malouf was basically a traveler. He has been mentioned as a candidate for the Nobel Prize in Literature. Now let us talk about the poem in a nutshell. The poem was first published in 1980 in a volume by the same name and later again in the volume called Poems 1959 to 1989. The poem Wild Lemons is the poet's recollection of the memories from his past. The poet lived in the island country of Australia before moving to the United Kingdom. In this poem, he discusses about one of his experiences from Australia that still revolves around his mind. So basically this is about a memory poem. However, there are a lot more things that are connected, not only the memory that is in fact a point of the poem. Now what is the summary? So I have given you here the summary, line by line summary. So here you can get the first half of the summary from lines 1 to 18. He describes about an experience when he was traveling with his friend. In Australia, he was on a road which would lead nowhere but keep him there, being surrounded by wild lemons. However, the poet says that it was this road that would rescue them out of the place. Then he goes on to describe the wild lemon trees, and the lemons are like the fruit was covered with tough skin, harder than the regular lemons. Its branches were covered with thorns. The poet says that since wild lemon trees are growing amid such deserted road, there must be someone who planted these. The sunlight helps the lemons grow, which would be later used to make drinks. The poet then talks about this island where the lemon tree was located. It was warm weather where the poet and his friends were humming in the midnight. They were quite worried about finding their way back home at midnight and hence taking deep breaths while discussing their plans in the midnight. The sea waves constantly hitting the shore is also mentioned by the poem in the lines. So this is the very short summary of the lines from 1 to 18. You can refer back to the summary section going through the poem. So what I have done also for you, that I have given you the original poem written by Malouf with the mentioning the line numbers, so you can trace back. You can open the PDF. I will give the PDF on the description link, and from the PDF you can relate to the summary by watching the video. The second part of the summary consists line number 18 to 32. That means to the end of the poem. The poet next refers to his present by asserting that the present stays with us forever. In the present scenario, the poet and his friends are gathered together sipping alcohol while it is 7 o'clock in the evening. During this time of the dark evening, the surrounding is prevailed by complete silence. The poet makes use of simile here, where he compares the silence to a flute tempting the stars to walk over the water. The poet is currently in the United Kingdom in a completely different weather than his homeland in Australia. Even though the surroundings differ, the poet's body and mind remains the same, so that of his year-old experience amongst the wild lemons. The poet then implies that sleep continues until darkness prevails. However, time keeps moving and doesn't wait for someone to wake up from their sleep. When he wakes up in the morning, time has passed by and the clouds have melted while he experiences the smell of the wild lemons in the air. Even though the poet is currently in Europe, the smell of the wild lemons remains the same to the smell of the lemons in Australia. Thus, the poet asserts to us that the smell of the wild lemons stayed forever with him even though he moved to a completely different region of the earth. So this is basically the poem. From line 1 to 32, in 2 segments I have given you the summary of the poem. Now, summary is not the end of the poem, because there are so many aspects, so many point of views that we can gather, that we can discuss thoroughly one after another, and after discussing them we can understand that the poem is not that easy that we can easily understand at the beginning. At least from the summary that we can guess, it is not like that. So let us go deeper again. Now, what we get in the poem, there are certain topics that I have selected. One is the interiorization of the landscape. Now, what is that? I'll come to that part definitely. Notion of metamorphosis, the primacy of the human body, the constitutive idea of transcendence, dreaming, that means the concept of dreaming, and this dreaming is not what you are expecting, it is a different sort of idea. Time as continuity, and finally mysterious in nature. There are something that are called mysterious in the nature, in the description of the nature in the poem. So let us again dissect one after another the ideas. The first one is that interiorization of the landscape. Now, what is called interiorization? Interiorization means to make it part of the internal world of the self or community. Through the poem, the poet is interiorizing the landscape, and how the landscape is getting into the mind and body of the poet. So he is making the part of his internal world, and thus mixing the internal and the outer world together in the poem. How he is going to do it? Now, the important aspect to this is the nature of Australian landscape, which was very different from the landscape other settlers encountered in America, for instance, or as they may have known in England. The Australian landscape invoked feelings of estrangement and anxiety, a geography that did not invite human presence and was not amenable to improvement or use in the way land in Europe and America could be. So there is a basic difference between the landscape of Australia and the landscape of America and Europe that the settlers encountered. The landscape of Australia invoked the sense of estrangement, that is the alienation and anxiety, the kind of anxiety that the poet is speaking about. Now look at the lines from lines 5 to 11. That starting out among blazed trunks, the track would not lead nowhere, that being set down here among wild lemons, our bodies were expected at an occasion up ahead that would not take place without us. One proof was the tough-skinned fruit among the thorns. So there is a very similar kind of description that you can find in the poem, but through the description you can understand that there is the concept of interiorization of the landscape, that the poet is trying to interiorize the landscape, wants to suggest his inner world and wants to get mixed up with the inner world of the outer world, that he is traveling from one place to another, he is not fixed somewhere. The helpful way to connect to this vast otherness is the way Aborigines have related to the land, which is not as something that can be molded in man's interest and image, but to inhabit it imaginatively, to interiorize it, as it may become then an entity that is then sustained and protected. What does Aborigines mean? Aborigines is a member of the original people to inhabit an area, especially as contrasted with an invading or colonizing people. Specifically, it is capitalized. Why? Because it refers to a member of any of the indigenous people of Australia. So the interiorization is this, that the poet is interiorizing the landscape through the description in the poem, that he is giving the description of the lemons, he is also giving the description of the wild lemons and his bodies are expected at an occasion up ahead that would not take place without us. So his body is present anywhere, be it in somewhere else in the Australia, be it somewhere else in the Europe, it doesn't matter. The same feeling is here. He is making his body parts, he is making his inner self to the outer self of the wild lemons, the outer self of that unknown invaded lands. So this is called interiorization of the landscape. Now similar kind of interiorization in a different way is also available in the next slide, that is the notion of metamorphosis. Now we all know what is called metamorphosis. It is a recurrent theme in Malouf's writing, where new possibility can be hedged in the mundane. as the closing lines of wild demon suggest. So what are the new possibilities? Whatever be the new possibilities that are connected with the mundane atmosphere, mundane facts. Now look at the lines from the closing lines of the poem. What goes in time and clouds melting into tomorrow of our breath, the scent of lemons and on wild another country, but smelling always of themselves. That means the poet is getting the sense of lemon, the smell of lemons, even he is not in Australia, even he is somewhere else. So it is completely that the self of the poet is completely metamorphosed. It is completely changed, and this change is inevitable through the internalization of the body, that the body becomes a part in the internalization, just as interiorization as you received from the earlier side. Here the concept of metamorphosis is also present. Metamorphosis is expressed in the poem in the merger of the human body in the body of the landscape. So there is human body, there is the body of the landscape. So the landscape also becomes an entity, very strong presence. It acts as a human being. The journey that's starting out among blazed trunks, and I lie down in different weather through the same body at both the individual level as well as that of the subsuming collective consciousness, is a transformative experience. This means that the poet's experience as expressed in the poem is a transformative one. So it is not fixed, it is transforming from one place to another place, from one sense to another sense. This is the metamorphosis of the body through the experience of the land. It is not only changing the body parts, that the body is present in somewhere else to somewhere else. That means the present in Australian landscape to the presence in the European landscape. So the metamorphosis is here through the lemons, through the wild lemons, the existence of the wild lemons. This individual level is connected with the collective consciousness, and this representation, this transformation is an experience, and the experience that the poet is having at the moment is a transformative experience. In that way, the concept of metamorphosis is working in the poem. This transformative idea is not typically shown to the readers by the poet. Malouf's poem not only invokes an idea of estrangement as we are understanding it, as we are discussing it, rather it gives us the feeling of uncanny sometimes. So it is the feeling of uncanny, strange behavior, strange factors are given. The third factor is that the primacy of the human body. So as we are talking about the human body, this primacy, the supreme authority, supreme presence of the human body is significant. In terms of space, how does the human body respond to the landscape? The primacy of the human body desires subjectivity, and it is foregrounded in the poem. Malouf strives, seemingly whenever possible, to encounter his world as a complete sensuous body. Now, Don Randall, in his The Poetry of Malouf, so published in 2007, comments that the senses that actually contact and interact with the substances of the world are brought into play. Things touched, tasted, and smelled often contribute indissociably to the composition of place. The idea is developed into metamorphization of the body and leads by extension to an erotics of place. So this erotics of place, that eroticism is here. Why eroticism? Because body is very much present in everywhere. It is the taste, it is the smell, it is the direct activity, it is the direct experience with touch and smell that gives us the sense of eroticism in the poem. But that is not the point. The human body becomes significant here, because through the body the poet is trying to gather the experience. It is not his mentality, it is not his thought process, it is not his experience, rather it is his body that is consecutively is present everywhere, and it is experiencing one after another, step by step through the process. If you can look at the lines from 6 to 8 and 24 to 25 and 28 to 29, throughout the lines you have the experience of the body and the reference of the body. Our bodies were expected at an occasion up ahead that would not take place without us. I lie down in different weather now though the same body. And finally in 28 to 29, the body tags along as promise to see what goes. So it is the primacy of the body, it is the presence of the body, it is the supremacy of the body which becomes significant in Malouf's poem. So the body becomes a significant aspect in the poem. The constitutive idea of transcendence. And what is transcendence? Transcendence is existence or experience beyond the normal or physical level. Like the notion of metamorphosis, which is cognitive process of interiorizing the landscape through experience, thought and sensory perception. The journey of the poet builds a connection between the individual and the collective that we have already discussed. The poet's journey is a transformative experience that also we have discussed. This transformation leads to transcendence of experiential and imaginative limitations. That this transcendence leads also to a sense of discovery at the end. What happens through this idea? The poet's idea rather is transforming from one to another, from one place to another. This transformation leads to transcendence. That means it is the experiential and imaginative limitation. It is crossing the limitations of imagination and experience. Transcendence leads also to a sense of discovery at the end, that the poet is discovering that the essence of the lemon, the smell of the lemon, the sense of the lemon, sensory perceptions are always present. Whether he is somewhere else or not, it doesn't matter. He was in Australia and he experienced the wild lemons. Now he is in England, but he is experiencing the same kind of smell. So this is the transcendence, that the existence or experience beyond the normal or physical level. You can follow the lines from 13 to 16. That another was the warmth of our island, sitting still in its bay at midnight, humming and rising to its own concerns. And in 26 to 28, our sleep is continuous with the dark or that portion of it that is the day's night. So even if you have the problems in understanding the lines, you can go through the summary part that in two parts I have given you, from line 1 to 18 and 18 to 32. So there you can also get the summary of the poem, the summary of the lines. So in that way you can also relate the concept of the poem to the concept of the transcendence, metamorphosis, etc. After that, let us talk about dreaming. So what is in fact dreaming? Dreaming is the notion of time in relation to memory and place as an element in the interiorization of the land. Is also connected to Aborigine belief in the connectedness between past and present. Past as inside of the present in a way that draws together human nature and the ever-present spirit of the world, described as dreaming. So our Aborigine notion or belief, that is dreaming. Dreaming is not something that we dream. Dreaming is something different. It is critical concept. The existence of past and present together, and the formation of present in the past and the formation of past in the present. So past as inside of the present in a way that draws together human nature and the ever-present spirit of the world. Malouf strives for this integration of the interior and exterior worlds. Inhabiting a land as settlers and latecomers requires the reciprocity of possession and belonging, interiorizing and reimagining it as native people have done. This is expressed in the interview with Jennifer Lavassier and Kevin Malouf, worldview, and in the page 341 to 342. So the concept of dreaming is interesting in that sense. Now, in that interview, Malouf speaks writing as public dreaming. So what does that signify? The inner and the outer becomes connected by a shared language, that is dreaming. Dreaming opens up the narrative into a shared wider world. The private inward world reaches into public dimension. This aspect is manifest in the images used in Wild Lemons. The island at midnight humming and rising. The flute tempts out a few reluctant stars to walk over the water. So what happens here? The inner world of the poem and the outer world of the poem are connected with each other by a shared language. That is dreaming. That means it is giving you a narrative structure, a narrative pattern into a shared wider world. The private inward world is mixing up or is reaching towards the public dimension. So something which you need to give a very serious description of your private world. Now that doesn't remain to the private only, that goes beyond your private dimension and it reaches to the public. So this concept, that means something which is reaching from private to the public. The concept is reaching by the help of dreaming, that there is a shared language, there is a shared concept, and through that concept the private becomes the public. So this is dreaming. Nature and ever-present spirit of the world described together as dreaming. Past and present are mixing together and reforming one another, that is called dreaming. Now if you can look into the lines, one proof was that the tough-skinned fruit among the thorns, someone had been there before us and planted this. So this is the inner part to the outer part. Another was the warmth of our island sitting still in its bay and midnight humming and rising to its concern. So the poet is enjoying somewhere else in a different location. But see that the other one and the present situation are getting mixed together. So in that way, the way they are mixed up, the way the something private becomes the public, this concept is called dreaming. The poet is giving you the descriptions of that kind. Time as a continuity, as our next suggestive topic, is that Malouf says time as a continuity, a kind of continuous present. Perhaps you can see this is the structural flow of wild lemons. Time Malouf sees in spatial terms and therefore not conceived in a linear line but understood and experienced in a dream or like medium that we all move through, unlike the sense of time as divided into units of days or other such demarcations. Time is not a fixed idea or entity as we can understand, because time is fluctuating. Time is somewhere at the moment, somewhere there is time in the past sense, and again somewhere it is shifting to the present. So time is a continuity, it is a continuous present. Now Malouf in his discussions on his work speaks about wanting to keep the tense of his work open, carrying forward from the notion of continuous present. The question of chronology or continuous past tense is cast aside, and naturally therefore presenting a different structure and logic as a result. So there is no past, there is only present, and the present is described in a way that you can understand that it is a very natural process. So time is not fixed anywhere, time is not a fixed idea or entity, it is continuously flowing. So time is continual, it is a continuity. So that concept is also significant in Malouf's poem, because Malouf gives significance to the time, because if he doesn't give the significance to the time, and if he doesn't create time as a part of continuity, his concept of dreaming is also will not be working together. So past and present could be mixed together, could be reforming one into another. In the same way it happens because time is flowing, time is a continuous process, it maintains a continuity. Now look at the lines. Line 1 and 2, through all those years keeping the present open to the light of just this moment. See that this is the present, that open to the light of just this moment. The present is always with us, always open. So if we want to talk about the present, this is always open, and if we want to talk about the past is also described in this poem. And in that way, through everything, that means through the transcendence, the concept of transcendence, interiorization and metamorphosis, all of the factors are grouping together only to express that time is not the subject of any fixed identity. Mysterious in nature, the last part. What is that concept, by the way? Perhaps it is a place of burial where our bodies were expected at an occasion. This suggests a communion with nature, while the existence of the lemon tree is a proof that perhaps our ancestors were there much before and planted the lemon tree. The resilience of nature is brought out succinctly by the use of the word tough-skinned fruit. In line 11, the fruit is called sunlight to be sliced for drinks. It has rich associations, as the round yellow colored fruit rich in vitamin C is as healthy as sunlight promoting vitamin D. These wild lemons have adapted themselves to various climes and times have survived through the ages. So these are the mysterious facts in nature. These are not very natural, these are not very usual kind of descriptions, because nature is here given as a imperfect embodiment of something. Nature is very close to the human being. Nature is very close to the poet. So there is a direct communion between human being and nature. And the resilience of nature is also expressed, as we have seen through the lines. He is now in another European country with a different weather, different climate. Yet in the alien land, nature continues to his senses. There is a fluid tempts out a few reluctant stars to walk over the water. The same body that had enjoyed slight sunlight in Australia is now in a European country that I am talking for a longer period of time. There too, nature continues to delight the senses, and the lemon gene satisfies the buds of the transcultural poet. Exactly the point that I was trying to figure out, that the same body of the poet is experiencing everything. Body that enjoyed sliced sunlight in Australia, and now in European country, the same body is enjoying the different kind of weather. Their nature too seemed to continue to delight the senses, and the lemon gene satisfy the buds of transcultural poet. That means the poet is also having the satisfaction in different weather, in different climate. So that is the mysterious part of nature. Nature is always present everywhere. Nature is also giving us delights in different ways. Now, just as we have understood so far the poem, these are the points, and now it is the time to give you the resources. There are certain resources that I have collected so far. Now in this URL you can get the PDF of Course, the very basic idea of the poem. And here Nathalie Sager, Imagining Transcendence, the poetry of David Malouf. I have given also the URL here too. From there you can get different segments, different ideas of David Malouf's poetry, the level of genius. The third one is that Manjula Shulapurkar's analysis of the Wild Lemons, and the last one is Journeys and Travesties since 1978 to 1981. From there you can get also another constitutive idea about the poem. So far what we have discussed, these are the points. Perhaps there are certain points still left. I don't know to what extent I have satisfied you to your thirst of knowledge, but still, if you have any problems, you can do a lot more homeworks. You can go through the URLs, you can get informations more from there. So till then, stay blessed, stay safe, have a good day.